Iowa, the first contest of the primary season and site of the Ames straw poll next month, is a land of opportunity for campaigns looking for traction. Which brings us to Tim Pawlenty. The former Minnesota governor is a serious, charming, well-credentialed candidate who hasn't moved the meter, polling in the low single digits nationally. He runs a distant third in Iowa polls behind Romney and fellow Minnesotan Michelle Bachmann. For Pawlenty, the man once seen as the strongest contender to fill the not Romney slot, pretty much everything now rides on Iowa. He is all over its political terrain, on the ground and in the air, with a classic underdog strategy.
You face an opponent experts say can't be beat. You fight, you bleed, you prevail. Join me and prove the experts wrong.
Friday, an encouraging word from Ohio Republican activist. Pawlenty placed second in a straw poll there, behind Romney, but ahead of Bachmann. Still, the August straw poll in Iowa is a far bigger headline moment. Pawlenty is reportedly spending about $1 million and definitely spending a whole lot of time revving up support. If not a make-or-break time, it is a rare chance to spark a campaign in need of fire. Tim Pawlenty in the Hawkeye State next. Governor, thank you for joining us. The debt ceiling. I think we're on plan C or D or E at this point. If you're president, you're on the hot seat, it seems to me. President Obama has got to come up with a deal, or he gets blamed for what could be default.
He should get blamed. He should get blamed.
Sure, but if you're in his position, but you're a Republican, okay, yeah, with your stated values, how would you get a deal at this moment?
Well, I've been a supporter, if I was president, of getting structural reforms, the cut, cap, and balance approach, long-term constitutional amendment to balance the budget, peg spending to a % of GDP so they can't just raise taxes.
Sure, but that's not going to happen between now and August.
Yes, but you're saying if I was president, what would I push for? That's what I'd push for.
Sure, but where would you, what I'm asking is, I think we know what you would push for, where would you compromise? Because cut, cap, and balance is not passing the Senate. You have to come up with something. And so I guess my question is, where's the give here, if there is? Because you have to get it past the Senate, yes, and the Senate's controlled by Democrats.
Well, first, I do want to say, let's remember how we got here. President Obama took office with a $500 billion or so deficit, and he ran it up to $1.5 trillion.
Can I just interject that he inherited 2 wars, he inherited an ongoing prescription drug plan that was passed under the Bush administration, and a recession that went deeper and deeper.
The 2 wars were taking place under President Bush at a larger level in Iraq. So again, when President Bush left office, there was a $500 billion deficit. Now it's about $1.5 trillion. Under President Obama's watch, he tripled the deficit of this country. He looked the American people in the eye in March of 2009, after he knew full well about the wars, after he knew full well about the economic collapse, after he knew full well about the Medicare Part D prescription drug expansion, and he looked the American people in the eye and said, I will reduce the deficit in half in my first term. And then he tripled it. That's one of his many broken promises, one of his many false statements, and he needs to be held accountable for it. Now, that being said, we are where we are, right, but they need to find a solution where they at least get some movement and progress towards real permanent reductions in spending. And I believe that, you know, Congressman Boehner and others could find a way to do that. You know, it's gut check time. And of course, if you say, well, we're really in a tough spot. Well, if they're not going to do real spending reform now, when is it going to be? They always say, oh, we're going to do the tough things soon. One day we're going to make tough decisions. Sometime we're going to make tough decisions. After the next election, we really might fix that. Well, the time is now. And as important as the debt ceiling is, the other issues of whether we're going to fix the spending problems of this country also deserve attention. And if not now, when? So one example would be, what are they going to do to fix Medicaid? It's bankrupting states. It's running the federal government over the cliff financially. Where's the President of the United States on the most pressing financial challenges of our country on entitlement reform? Where is his specific Medicaid reform proposal? Where is his specific Medicare reform proposal? Where is his Social Security reform proposal? The answer is he doesn't have one. You can't find him publicly talking about that. He's ducking, he's bobbing, he's weaving, he's not leading, and that's not the kind of president we need, and that's why he needs to be removed from office.
We should say that apparently with Speaker Boehner, he has talked about some of these reforms.
Well, in hiding, if you're the leader of the free world, would you please come to the microphone and quit hiding in the basement? about your proposals and come on up and address the American people? Is he chicken?
Can I see if I... Is he?
Well, you would think
let me have you answer
we
that
shouldn't
question.
have to have, with all, I love Paul Ryan, but we shouldn't have to have a congressman from Wisconsin leading the debate on the nation's financial challenge in one of the most historically important moments in the country's history. The president should be standing out courageously and leading on these issues specifically. And you can't find him.
But he's agreed to do that. As we're told, and I grant you, and I want to move on from this, but I just want to say, he's agreed to do that in private, but they say the problem is that the Republicans...
If we want to do it in private, we can go down to the VFW basement. I can go have a beer with my neighbor over that. He's the president. Come on out of the basement and come on out to the lawn of the White House with a microphone and tell us your plan on entitlement reform. And he won't do it because he doesn't have the courage to do it.
All of these things that you're talking about now, Medicare, Medicaid, even cuts at the Pentagon, can't get done between now and the time that debt ceiling. So let me just see as a wrap-up question, if I understand where you are, you'd let that debt ceiling, you'd let that time frame expire.
They're going to have to fix it, Candy. They're going to have to fix it. We don't want to default. The United States of America shouldn't default, but they do need, they, meaning the Republicans and the president, need to show the country and the world and the markets, A, that they can fix the problem, but B, that it's a meaningful, structural, permanent fix, or at least a step, a piece of real progress in that regard. And we'll see if they can do it. If they can't, he was the one, when he was a U.S. Senator, Barack Obama said it's an example of failed leadership. And now he's the leading champion of raising it. Again, another sophistry, another piece of fake rhetoric from him. He made all these big promises to the country, all these big speeches, all these big, things that he said he was going to do, and he hasn't done any of it. We've had enough of it. We need results. The country is sinking. The country is drowning. We need real leaders. And that's why this, emphasis on entertainment and rhetoric is not the right direction for the country.
When we come back, Governor Pawlenty on his opposition to gay marriage. Welcome back. We are here with former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. The first legal gay marriages will take place in New York. They have been in place here in Iowa for more than a year. And what has been the harm of that?
Well, from my standpoint, I don't think all domestic relationships are the same as traditional marriage, Candy. I think that a marriage between a man and a woman is something that should remain elevated socially, culturally, and practically, legally, morally in our society.
Sure, but but I understand your position on it, which is many people have that position. I'm just wondering if you see that there has been harm to Iowa, to the state of Iowa, or will there be harm to the state of New York because they've legalized gay marriage?
Well, I wouldn't phrase it that way in the sense that I think there's just a difference of opinion about whether all domestic relationships are, in the eyes of the law and otherwise, going to be the same as traditional marriage. I don't think they should be.
Why?
I know other people.
I mean, in particular, what should gay couples or lesbian couples not have that straight couples do?
Well, I think we have a long-standing practice. It's social, it's legal, it's cultural, that says a man and a woman are joined together for obvious reasons. In relationship, in marriage, in procreation, in raising children, in their function in society. And I'm not at the point, nor will I ever be at the point, where I'm going to say, you know what, that really is not special. It's not any different than any other domestic relationships that we can imagine or assemble. I don't buy that at all.
But there's a difference between you're saying, look, I'm just never going to get there, and saying there is harm to the state of Iowa or society in general.
I think when society devalues traditional marriage by saying all other domestic relationships are the same as traditional marriage, you then dilute and devalue traditional marriage.
And it's a cultural thing to you, that just culturally or religiously you don't believe that and won't believe that.
Well, it's more, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a social and cultural and moral issue, but it also has practical effects. I mean, I think, obviously a man and a woman together are the traditional family. That's how children are born and raised traditionally.
There's plenty of single parents.
Of course.
There are plenty of gay couples with children that have, adopted or otherwise, had surrogates, whatever happens. Are those not families?
There are many examples of single parents and others who heroically and lovingly raise children. Obviously, an example would be somebody who, lost a spouse and is working 2 jobs and has children. And so I'm not saying that there can't be, single parents, and there obviously are single parents who are wonderful parents. I'm just saying we want to maintain traditional marriage elevated in the eyes of the law and in our society. It is not the same as other domestic relationships.
Let me bring your attention to something that Rudy Giuliani told us last week. We're talking about gay marriage, and he's also opposed to marriage. He's pro-civil union. But he said of the New York move and other states, I think the Republican Party would be well advised to get the heck out of people's bedrooms and let these things get decided by states. Do you think it is time for the Republican Party to say, or members of the Republican Party such as yourself to say, I'm never going to agree with this, but you know what, we got a lot on our plate, let this one go, let the states decide and move on?
Clearly, the main focus for the country right now is the economy and jobs and our finances. But if you're going to be president of the United States, you got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time and address lots of different issues. So these issues of being pro-family or pro-traditional marriage or being pro-life are important, and they're important to me, and I think they're important.
Most of the polls that we now see are that the majority of people favor gay marriages. So does the Republican Party look like it's behind the curve? Does it risk looking intolerant?
Well, every time this issue has been put to the people, even in California, the people have supported traditional marriage. So this notion that the people broadly don't support traditional marriage, that hasn't been the case when it's been put to a vote.
Do you care if there are same-sex couples who have gotten married? I mean, does that truly bother you, or is it just as a general principle?
Look, to me, it's just the idea that we're going to have traditional marriage be viewed in the eyes of the law and society as no different than other domestic relationships, I think is a bad idea. We want traditional marriage to remain elevated legally and socially because it plays an obvious and unique role in our culture and society.
Man and a woman having a child is what you're talking about.
And a man and a woman in relationship. I mean, to say that that is somehow the equal of all other possible domestic relationships defies common sense, Candy.
Governor Pawlenty, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.